I'm Annie Walker. I'm the workshop specialist at Rochester Works. And one of my all-time favorite people in the whole world is here, and that's Rita Carey. Dr. Rita Carey is a close friend and colleague. She is what I consider the guru of the 40-plus job search, and you can see that series at the Fairport Library. You will see some of her stuff with us starting in February. We're going to be bringing her in for some workshops over the next couple of months. But today she put together something particularly just for you today. We know that when you're doing this type of process, as far as looking for new career opportunities, it can get to be overwhelming. So she's going to give you some tips today on how to overcome that. So thank you very, very much for giving us again of your time and your service. Rita's going to tell you a little bit about her, but ask her some questions, listen to what she says. She will never steer you wrong. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to start out by saying I don't want to diminish the impact of the job search. It's, you know, when it's like you're between trapezes and there's no safety net underneath and you don't see a trapeze, you know, swinging towards you. You don't see what's going to come next. It's not quite clear. And it's an awful, you know, vulnerable place to be. So I'm going to be talking about some things that might assist with that, but I'm not diminishing the seriousness and the emotional as well as physical impact of going through a job search in a tight labor market, especially when that turned out to be an unplanned event, right? I mean, I'm assuming there are people sitting in this room who did not think they were going to have to look for another job in this lifetime, who thought they might retire from the company they were with, right? Who even were kind of encouraged to stay because you're probably not going to be hit. I've heard that over and over, and but it happens. It's like an unanticipated, unplanned for event, and there we are facing something we thought we wouldn't have to do. And there are all kinds of emotions involved in that. And so how would you, I really want a lot of participation because I think it brings out better information, and I love to hear from you. So how would you describe, what would be your definition of overwhelm? How would you describe overwhelm? What's that like, this feeling of overwhelm? Yeah.
Knowing quite what to do next for the best benefit.
Right. A lot of alternatives, wondering what to do first, next. Right. What else? Yes.
Process too much information coming from too many areas at one time.
Yep. Yeah. Can't get it, can you? I mean, it's, where do you begin? Yes, Larry.
The whole process of looking for a job that's so radically different than it was when I was last employed.
Yeah.
It was about 31, 32 years ago.
Right. And so what does that feel like? I mean, that's the issue, but what does it feel like?
Well, not only overwhelming, but also frustrating.
Frustrating.
Especially if you're an older worker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't know how you go about to handle it, how to deal with it.
That's right.
And it's a whole different ballgame with a whole different set of rules in it.
You got it. Yeah.
If you're going to play the game, if you're going to get a glove and get in the game, you got to play by the rules.
There's a learning curve to learning how to find a job today. It's steeper than most people expect. Todd.
It's like holding your breath underwater and trying to swim up to the top.
Oh, wow. Like holding your breath underwater and trying to swim up to the top. Know that feeling?
Somebody's
Yeah.
holding you down.
Especially if you, and Larry says, and somebody's holding you down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when somebody's holding you down and you're trying to gasp for air.
Right. What else have you experienced? What other, yes.
I think one most important for me is from the financial aspect. As you go towards the end, when you don't see what you want, but at the other end is your money is going down. So
Yeah.
that's overall because you run out of time.
The financial aspect of it, you know, the being overwhelmed by what could happen financially, right? That's scary. That's scary. What else? So, yes.
I know in my case, I worked for a company for 24 years, and then overnight my job was gone. And I really underestimated the emotional impact of working with people for nearly a quarter of a century, and then just suddenly they're out of your life. You're not going to see them again. And, you know, you get used to that routine of getting up every morning, driving the same route, going to work, getting to your office, doing the job, and then it's just gone in an instant.
Yeah, the routine is gone, and even some of those people you saw every day that you didn't like, you miss.
Yeah.
You know, it was familiar. You know, you could go in every day knowing, okay, you got to deal with him today, but you knew you were going in, right? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what you know, some of the people that work with this, how they encourage you to look at it, and what they recommend in terms of dealing with the overwhelm itself. So Ginny Kravitz is a colleague of mine in another state, and she defines it this way. She says, it's like to be drowned in work, but some of the descriptions given here I'm going to use in the future. I like them better. Buried, crushed, defeated, powerless, covered as by a great wall. And some of the typical feelings that come with that overwhelming sense of overwhelm, awkwardness, you know, uncertain about what to do next, feeling awkward where we never felt awkward before. This may or may not be true for you. A lot of ambivalence about how we should proceed, and also ambivalence about how marketable am I. Whereas we felt, you know, you could have felt very competent in the work you did before, and now you're out there. And now I'm wondering, oh my gosh, you know, I'm feeling pretty ambivalent about myself. Isolation. For some people, there is isolation because this used to be truer before this recent recession. But there were actually cases, and I've done this work for many years, there were actually cases where the wife never knew the husband lost the job. He left every single morning and came back every single night at the same time. The neighbors didn't even know. And that's because of feeling so vulnerable and so awkward about it. So for that individual who's not talking to anybody about it, can't share it with his family, there's a real sense of isolation and a tremendous amount of stress. I mean, how many people think there's no stress involved in the job search? And if you do, stay afterward, please, because I want to know how you go about a job search with no stress. Today especially, but I think any time, actually. Now, don't forget, I'd love you to chip in, so please talk about anything that comes up that you think is relevant. Please do share it. So what do you do? You know, what do you do when you feel that sense of overwhelm? What do you do? Yes.
Well, I know for me, coming from my perspective, I'm a lot different than everyone else here. I'm a soon-to-be college graduate at RIT, and just a month ago, I was interviewing for 2 full-time offers out in New York City. Got neither of them because one said I was too qualified, and the other said they had a choice between 2 people, and they chose the other. That was an extreme feeling of just, I was so overwhelmed. I had applied for hundreds of jobs over the past 4 months. I thought that was it, and it wasn't. So when I got to that position, I called my parents, called my network, my friends, and I said I didn't get it, and I felt embarrassed. But I turned to the ones that I loved, and whether it be family, friends, whoever, and just talked it out. Made myself feel, they helped make me feel better, and at that point, you say, at that point I just said, you know what, it's over, it's done. You say thank you, send your thank you emails, and you try again for something else.
Yeah.
So you always keep looking forward, and you turn to your network and say, thank
so
you.
That's how you handled that. So when you first learned you didn't get it, what did you do immediately?
I kind of just stared at I got an email on my phone, I kind of just stared at it in shock, because all the signs had pointed to the fact that I got it. So I kind of just, it was shock. I wasn't sure exactly what to do because this is the closest I've ever been to something like that before. So I honestly didn't know what to do. The only thing I could think of at the time was just to call my mom and dad.
Call your mom and dad. Yeah. What you're talking about is what's called social support, and it can. Oh, not me. You're not hearing me back there? As loud as I am, my kids would say they can't believe that. I don't think it's on. No. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I'm sorry you can't. I'm sorry you couldn't hear me. what you're talking about is social support. And a number of years ago, I managed a career center for General Electric when they were closing a plant. And there were about 853 employees involved, all going to be without jobs. And most of them on the production line, but then there was also management. And so after I happened to be in a doctoral program at the time, so I decided that I would do my dissertation. My research would be looking at those people who lost those jobs during that time, all of whom I knew actually, and see how they made out. So I looked. I started. You have to have background research to support what you're doing. And I started looking at the work of Nancy Schlossberg and Bernice Newgarden, and they talk about transitions. Bernice Newgarden talks about the on-time, off-time transition. And so when you lose a job when you're older, that's an off-time transition usually for most people. So it makes it irregular from the standard pattern. The other thing they talk about, especially Nancy Schlossberg, talked about what are the things that most impact how you get through something like this. And what you were talking about is social support. It is the most significant factor in terms of dealing with these, what I consider traumatic experiences in many cases. And so that was nice, and so thank you for sharing that. Anybody else, what if you wake up in the morning and, you know what, I've been looking and I've been sending resumes and I've been online and so, when you find yourself there, what do? Cry, drink? No. What do you do for yourself? How do you deal with it? Any thoughts? Can you recall? You don't feel overwhelmed? Why are you in here? No, seriously, yes.
One of the things I've done is I've gotten more physically active. The gym membership that I had, I'm starting to use.
Oh, good. Physically active, using a gym membership. Don't forget the why. They've got some great things. Yeah, great.
That hour that I do, that I'm not concentrated, I'm able to relieve my mind of other things.
Yeah. So you're totally in the moment with what you're doing when you're exercising, right? Anyone else? Someone else? Yes.
Volunteer, like exercise and volunteer, keep yourself occupied.
Keeping yourself occupied. So say you got up one morning and you're saying, it's too much. I thought maybe they were going to call me, they didn't call me, or you got some bad news, or you didn't even get the interview, and you're really feeling overwhelmed. What would be the first thing you might do? Or what would you do that day? Exercise. Exercise. Physical, something physical, right? Yeah. Other ways of coping with that. Other things you might do.
I've gotten more involved in my daughter's school. She's in 5th grade, so I'm trying to volunteer every so much as I can.
So volunteering. And how does that help you, Sandra?
Just seeing the kids' faces just makes me feel happy. Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah. So when you leave your volunteering, then you just shift back into the job search mode and you make that transition. But it must steady you in some way because you've got something to go to, right, and that you're doing. It steadies you. Something else. Yes?
Spiritual support. I'm not negating the practical aspects of a search, but I'll start my day up praying to God, asking for His help, because I believe that He's there, even though I'm going through a valley, and that He'll provide in due time.
Yes, spiritual support, whatever that means for you. That's a great way as well. What else?
Talking with my job coach.
Talking with your job coach. Good. So I bet you get some encouragement, right?
Yes.
And yeah, great. So again, that's social support in a professional sort of way. Anything else? Yes.
I went back to school.
You went back to school. And so does that delay your search? Or are you searching while you're going?
Both.
Both. Okay.
I didn't search as much while I was going to school.
Yeah. So that was a great interval. Now when you have to face looking for that job though, what are you going to do for, I'm sure going back to school may have decreased the overwhelm of looking for the job because you're feeling more current, more contemporary, more ready. Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the emotional
Yeah.
that I'm more prepared for.
You feel more prepared. Great. Well, what might the, let's take a look. We're going to go back and look at how we deal with it some more, but what might be the, what's triggering it? I mean, could it be something that we need to look at that we're doing? This is just a question. So could it be that we're over-planning? Could it be we spending a lot of time in planning and we're putting a lot on our plates and it's burdensome, it's heavy? Or could it be under-planning, not knowing what you know how hard it is to create a new structure once you've left a job, and that lots of people will say that that's the hardest part of the job search, is that you don't have a routine set up. And so every day, may not be true for you, but for many, you're making a decision about what you're going to do that day. And that's a complex process. What should I do first? And so it could be over-planning, under-planning. Do you think fear is a part of it? Do you think? Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of response to that. And what's the fear about? What can somebody share a little bit more about fear? Yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to begin, but getting your hopes up and then having them come crashing down.
Yeah, yeah. And what about, and that's one thing. So what else? So you're afraid, so is the fear of rejection?
Yes.
Fear of rejection.
I'm used to that now.
Excuse me?
I have more rejection now than junior high school.
So you know how to handle it? And that was bad enough, right?
Yeah.
You know how to handle it? You should be an expert. That's a shame. I'm sorry to hear that. Yes?
You're maybe letting someone down. Like, I just moved here, so I didn't think it taking this long to find a job, so when I told my husband I didn't find something yet or something didn't turn out, kind of.
Letting somebody down. Letting somebody down, right.
Fear of dipping into my 401k.
Fear of dipping into the oh yeah, which everybody will tell you don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, right? And I see, meet people on the brink of that, have family members in other parts of the country on the brink of doing that. And I'm saying don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So that's a real fear. So does it inhibit you? Do you think the fear works for you? Does it increase your sense of overwhelm? I mean, is that what it's, is that what's happening, and is that overwhelm coming from that? It's just a question to think about. So I want to ask you this. Anybody here who can tell me, I want to hear a negative. I want to hear what you're coming up with that is just not, it seems hopeless to you or is just not working. What is going on? What are you facing? What is a belief you have about this whole process that might be a part of your overwhelm? So what do yes?
I've been in a lot of jobs in a very short period of time. And with the degree that I have a bachelor's in nursing, which everybody says, oh, well, there's so many jobs out there, and in the Rochester area there isn't. And it gets to the point where you think, well, maybe I should do something else because people are seeing a bad track record and not wanting to even give the chance.
So what's your fear?
That I'm not going to get anything and I'm not going to be able to use the degree that I worked so hard for.
Right. And that's because you believe what?
I believe that I'm good at what I do.
And what do you believe that makes you think you're not going to get a job?
Because of my track record, because of all the schools in the area that have nursing programs. We don't have, 10, 15 hospitals like Buffalo or Syracuse. We only have a select few, and once you burn your bridge with one, pretty much you burn your bridge with everything for that company too.
So your fear is, your belief is that it's flooded market and that maybe there's something in your past work history that's keeping you from getting a job. So would you allow me to work through that with you a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So do you know that that's true?
Which part?
That either of those, that you're, well, we'll pick, which one's your greater fear?
The track record.
The track record.
Yeah.
So do you know that that's true?
Some of the interviews I've had, it has been very true. And I've had people tell me, they're not going to look at you because you have all these jobs within these short periods of time.
Yeah. And your fear is that you won't be able to get any job because of that, right?
Correct.
Right. And so I'm asking, do you know that that's true, that you won't be able to get any job?
No.
No, right. You can't know it's true, right? So what do you hear yourself saying to yourself? See, if you're framing it, and I'm not suggesting that I wouldn't be doing the very same thing, okay, so this is, nobody's wrong here. But if we frame it as though, in some ways, then it's really, it'll come true. You frame it, it'll be true. So one of the things that Katie, this is Katie Byron, and I want to tell, I'm sorry, Byron Katie, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. In February 1906, while she was in a halfway house for women with eating disorders, Byron Katie experienced a life-changing realization. I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, I suffered, but that when I didn't believe them, I didn't suffer, and that this is true for every human being. Freedom is as simple as that. I found that suffering is optional. We're not changing the circumstances, but the suffering. I found a joy within me that has never disappeared, not for a single moment. People immediately began seeking Katie out and asking how they could find the peace that radiated from her. She calls her method of self-inquiry the work. She has taught it to millions of people all over the world at free public events, in prisons, hospitals, churches, corporations, shelters for survivors of domestic violence, universities and schools, at weekend intensives, and at her 9-day school for the work. She is taught all over the world. The work, this is her method. The work is a way of identifying and questioning the stressful thoughts that allegedly cause all the suffering in the world. It consists of 4 questions and the turnaround, which allows you to experience the opposite of what you believe. The 4 questions asked of a stressful thought are, is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? How do you react, or what happens when you believe that thought? And who would you be without that thought? So I'm going to ask, I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. Stacy? Stacy, when did you first come to that conclusion? When did that thought first occur to you? That, look, I'm not, I've had some bad experiences, and I've got this track record, and I'm not going to be able to get a job. Do you remember when you first started saying that to yourself?
Probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, because I was unemployed for almost 2 years.
Okay, so you began to say, all right, you've got this message in your head that's saying, I'm not going to be able to get a job. I'm not going to be able to. So what were you like before that thought? How were you different?
I was probably happier in what I was doing because I felt secure. I felt that I was doing what I wanted to do and what I went to school for.
Mm-hmm.
I was just comfortable where I was.
You were comfortable? You felt good about yourself?
Yep.
Felt good about yourself? Were carrying out your plans? Working it had some continuity. It was what you went to school for, etc. So who would you be without that thought today? Would you be the old Stacy? If you didn't have the negative thought, if you didn't have the thought about I'm never going to get a job, who would you be without it? Be the Stacy that you were before that thought
Absolutely.
occurred, right?
Yep.
Different kind of person?
Yeah.
Yep. Facing the job search differently?
Yep.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that. These are some of the stories we tell ourselves. There are so many applying, I won't stand a chance. Nobody wants me because I'll mess up. This stuff doesn't really work. I bet you've thought that more than once. Somebody's told you to do something, and I can't do that because I'm not good at that. I'm not good at talking to people. I'm not good at networking. I'm not good at interviewing. Whatever. And any other thoughts that we have. So if that's how we're framing it, that's how it will be. If we're framing it and putting ourselves into this, we have this belief. There are so many people I don't stand. I'm too old. That's a belief. I'm too old. There was a gentleman in my workshop, not this past November, but earlier last year, who was 72 years old, and he had taken several of my workshops. I do the over 40 workshops. He always sat right in the front, always had a suit on, and so I talked to him a little bit after one of the sessions, and he was telling me what he did, and I'm looking at him. He had a good life. He didn't need this for money. He needed this for his sense of himself. And he had all these skills. So anyway, what ends up happening is he comes in one time and he says, I'm starting. And he started out as a contract, and he sent me an email a few months later and said he had been hired by the company. 72. He didn't look 20. He looked in like late 60s or 70s. And I can't judge. But my point is, it can be a barrier. We do know there's some bias. There's bias about a lot of things. We can't control it, But if we frame it that way, it will come true. So Stacy, I'm gonna ask you to talk to me later.
Okay.
Okay? And we'll talk some more about it. So what she says, what Byron Katie says, think about life without that thought. Drop the story for a moment, and what do you see? And she says, turn the thought around and replace it. So Stacy, I want you to replace that thought. I'm never going to get a job because I've got a poor track record and there are too many nurses in the area. Turn it around.
I may have a better chance of getting a job because of the experience I have.
You may have a better chance of getting a job because of the experience you have. You might also say the medical profession is growing. I have that experience and I have that education, so I have a good opportunity for a job. Reframe, they use this with athletes, that they envision, they actually use visioning to vision themselves, doing this particular, playing this tennis game or doing this jump. They actually use this, not Katie's stuff, but the visioning. So drop the story and turn that thought around and replace it. Now, a number of years ago, there was a psychologist actually doing something at our church. He was doing a series for parents, and this goes back a while. And one of the things that he said that I never forgot was, he said, those negative tapes in your head, I don't know about you, but I've got them. I'm not good at this, or I wish I did, I don't do this as well as I should, or, oh, I messed that up. And so those negative tapes we have, he said to everyone, you cannot tape over them. They are permanent. But you can make new tapes. You make new tapes. And when you see yourself and hear yourself and feel yourself going to those negative tapes that come from all kinds of things in our lives, you turn them off. You turn them off. And the best way to do that is with a mantra. Somebody did something really, I'll tell you a personal story. Somebody did something really, really bad to me. It was subversive. I had done nothing to cause it. I was blindsided by it, and it almost ruined my career. Doesn't matter what her motives were. It doesn't matter, but the fact that it happened. And you know what? It didn't ruin my career, thank goodness. But I could never stop thinking about it because I felt so betrayed. And I thought about how it was really calculated. I couldn't believe this woman did that. She was a former nun. And she calculated it, and it was, you know, it was about getting my job, actually. So anyway, the thing is that I would think, to this day, if I think about that, my stomach is in a knot. And so what I found that I had to do was I had to start saying, it would happen to me when I was driving, and it was a while back. So I said to myself finally, okay, I don't want to go there anymore. There's no benefit to going there. And so it just fills me with such negative emotion. And so I said, I've got to have a mantra, something I say to stop that thought. And so I didn't think of anything very clever. I just said, I don't go there anymore. And whenever it pops up now, I don't go there anymore. I say that immediately. What I say is the truth. What I say is what I feel and what I do. So I don't go there anymore. I talked to a woman when I was in another job, and this woman was telling me, she worked in the office next to me, and she was telling me, it was in a college, and she was telling me about something that had happened to her there in another department, and she was telling me this story. And I could see, and I said, you feel that? You really feel that? And she said, oh, I do, because it was unfair, and it, you know, all of that. And she said, but, you know, I keep trying to get over it, and I can't get over it. And then I talked to somebody else who was telling about something that happened to them, and I've come to the conclusion, well, in fact, this person said to me, she was telling me about what happened, and she said, I'm not going to tell many people, but I did talk to a couple of people, and they said things have happened to them like that. That there's something that was so awful in their lives, some betrayal, or, you know, maybe, you know, the way some people have been laid off, that's another thing. You know, I had a client in another state who started looking before he lost his job, but he was director of marketing in a very famous science museum. And I'll skip some of the details, but anyway, what happened was he hadn't had a raise in 10 years. He was starting to look elsewhere, and he knew where he wanted to go, but it was subtle and it was quiet because as a marketing manager he had to meet with people anyway. And he said one day he had asked for a raise. He said he'd been there 10 years and he had asked for an increase in salary. And one day his supervisor and somebody else in the company came in, sat down, and this is what they said. I know you asked for a raise, but I'm here to tell you, you don't even have a job. This is a well-respected man in that city, and he did get his next job, and he did get the one he wanted. But that's brutal. That's one of the cruelest ways. So we can have instances like that are so unfair, maybe, you know, in our view, very unjust and uncalled for, and they hurt, and they stay with us. So you have to stop those. So if you're carrying some of those, that rejection, you have to stop it. Because you cannot, I defy anyone to look for a job today that doesn't experience rejection. You know, or interpret what's happening as rejection. When they don't get a call back when their resume was sent in, does that frustrate people? How many people hear from the companies when they send in their resume? How many get a letter from the companies saying they got it? You have sometimes? Anybody else? A couple people? I don't know how people in this room, but so far it's about 3 that have gotten letters. Do you think it's typical to get a letter or response from an employer? No. Yeah, well, there are people that see that as rejection. I'm working with a young, inexperienced person in Virginia. Somebody asked me to help out, and he was going to send one resume and wait. I said, you can't do that. You cannot do that. A lot of people are looking where he is because they closed a plant, and they do the kind of work he does. You can't do that. But you know, his thinking, this was his thinking. But that's, you know, so if we do that, if we find this perfect job in the company we want and everything, and we go online and we submit our resume, and we wait and we wait and we wait, and they don't let you know even that they got it. And of course, I know everybody in this room would not wait. They would follow up 3 days later and contact the company, right? If you can. If you can. Yeah, not so easy today. So, but, you know, so the point is that rejection is a part of it if you interpret it that way. The inability to change what you can't, what isn't within your control is tough. So notice your expectations. Expectations of the employers that they will answer every, they'll let you know when they get your resume and tell you whether they're considering you. My friend in Maryland is the vice president of human resources in a large company, and I was talking to her this morning, and she said, Rita, tell them about my experience. She said, I'm a single person in this office. And she said, I'm dealing with grievances, payroll, new hires, interviews. And she said, and all these resumes come in, some of which she said, I get resumes that have absolutely nothing to do with what we do. And she said, how could I possibly respond to all of those? My boss would be wondering why I wasn't doing my work. And so our expectation of employers, what about your contacts? People that you knew that you thought might be helpful to you, how is that working out? Anybody been let down by people that they thought might be able to help them? Or maybe they weren't as interested as we thought they might be or something? Anybody experience that? No. Sometimes people find that with families, that the kind of support that they would expect to get from a family they're not getting. That's common, by the way. It's common. And there are a lot of reasons for that. If somebody else, a couple of examples, a couple of ways in which that might happen. If somebody else is dependent on your income and they haven't looked for a job in this market, they can be saying, so what did you do today, right? How many resumes? You can take over your job search. And I always say there's a way to make sure that doesn't happen if you begin it as soon as you lose your job, and that is by sitting down on Fridays with a glass of wine or a glass of lemonade or a cup of tea and sitting down with that person and showing them your plan for the next week and what you've done that week. You hold it. You don't give it over to anybody, but keep people informed because of anxiety. How about your friends? Anybody ever felt let down by them? Some people have told me that. Friends just kind of saying, well, why aren't you getting a job? Are you looking? Are you really working at this? Former colleagues. I wanted to say something about that because you mentioned, no longer see the same people at work and everything. And I wanted to say something about that. One of the things that happens if you're laid off and there are still people working there, and some of those people are your good friends, one of the things that happens, I've had so many of my friends tell me this, how hurt they were that so-and-so didn't stay in touch with them after they were laid off. And what you have to do is you have to initiate that communication because they're so embarrassed and feel badly that they've still got a job and that you haven't. So they don't know how to reach out to you comfortably. They don't know what your response will be. Will you be angry? They can't afford to get into a conversation about the company. They cannot afford to do that. And so you have to reach out to them. And it has to be nothing about the job. If it's somebody you want to socialize with, say, hey, I'd still love to get together like we used to for coffee. And so also your expectations of the job search process. When you first started out, when I asked the question about who were you before you had that thought, when you first started looking for a job, did you realize what it was going to entail? How many people knew what it was going to entail? How much work it was going to be? Few people did? Did most people expect that? You knew that, huh? How did you know?
Did it 20 years ago.
Okay, and it was tough then? And it was tough then? Wow, see? Yeah. You remembered it. Yeah, it's a memorable event. So I don't know, but a lot of people, if I meet with them when they've just lost, like anybody in here who's only been out of work for 3 months or less? A few people, okay. It feels different, I think other people in the room would tell you, when you've been out for 9, right? You feel different about everything, about the job search, about yourself, when you've been out for 9. And today, that's not uncommon. That doesn't mean anything's wrong. Something's wrong with somebody. It has a lot to do with the market. It has everything to do with the market. So it can be very discouraging, and it can be very complex, and it tends to be sophisticated today. So look at each of the stressors that you have. Anything that is stressing you out, look at that and see whether it's in your control or not in your control. Because sometimes when I meet with someone who's been searching for a while and they're really, really distressed, and when we start talking about what's bothering them, there are a whole bunch of things they have no control over. They have no control over it. And so if we if we can't control it, we don't want to be stressing over it. We don't have that energy. And if it is something we can control, then we know we have to work on it. So I want to know, what about the job search is, what are the stressors in the job search? Let's write them down. Okay? All right. What stresses you out? Yes. The unknown, meaning
Not knowing what will be happening next week or tomorrow, or if you never know when you're going to get a phone call.
right. The unknown. This is a very weak flip chart or stand. Okay, what else? What else? Yes. Yeah.
Oh, start getting a job before you run out of money.
Run out of money. Okay, yeah, ooh, real thing.
We touched on this before, but I think employer bias toward older workers.
So the fear is your age will keep you from getting a job.
Yeah, it's not a level playing field.
Age, right. What else stresses you about this? Yes?
Not finding what you want, settling for something else, because you don't know what's going to come next week, and then settling for...
So that's kind of a fear, right? That's a fear of not getting what you want.
Yeah.
And so do you dwell on that, and then that stresses you out? So unable to get what you want? What else? Think about going through the job search. Anybody stressed about coming to the career fair and meeting with employers today? No?
More rejection.
Oh.
How about too much outsourcing to other countries?
So what's stressing you about that?
Why can't they do it here? Eventually, every country's going to be outsourced. They're going to realize they want the money, and sooner or later, they're going to end up with no countries to outsource to.
So you're stressed about outsourcing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What else? Think about going through the job search or facing your week or coming to a career fair or going to Rochester Works, or what are you going to do today in your job search? What are your activities today? Yes?
Is my resume or cover letter good enough?
Ah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, what else? Yeah.
Taking a job with a temp agency for less pay and not getting hired.
So again, it's the fear of, so what's the fear there?
This keeps happening year after year after year.
Temp
It's like
jobs,
Groundhog Day.
temp jobs, and no hire. So
Yeah.
your fear is no permanent employment, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's happening a lot, isn't it?
It's been happening for years.
Okay, no permanent employment, no permanent employment.
I don't mean to dominate, but time is one of my stress factors, because the longer you're unemployed, the more unemployable you become. So the clock's running.
Yeah. Right. Right. What else? Yeah.
Fear that not bringing my A game to the interview, that I'm blowing it.
Ah, blowing the interview. Well, most of the things that you mentioned are things you have control over. I mean, to a certain extent, at least. But we don't have control over the fact that companies outsource. We probably can't change that, right? So we don't have control over that. We don't have control over age. Age is what it is. To a certain, I don't know. I guess if we can't find a job, we don't have control over our money, right? I mean, if we keep looking and looking and looking and we only have so much, then that's a real fear. And fear of the unknown. The time pressure stresses some people out, and blowing the interview, the resume and the cover letter, is it going to be good enough? I want to say a word about that. I know people that just won't send them because that's never quite good enough. Well, if it doesn't go out, it's not good enough. So we can get overstressed about all those details. So, we need to find a way for somebody to confirm to us that it's been proofread, at least, that it's been proofread. We need to, obviously, there are ways to learn how to do that, because you have a great career center here, which many of the cities do not have. So the point only is, make sure that what is stressing you out is something within your control, because you can't afford that energy going out anywhere else. And when it paralyzes you, when you have that day, and some of you already talked about this earlier, when you have that day that you just can't do it, or you are, I don't know, that you're just at your wit's end, then take a walk, call a friend, or take a break. And many of you talked about and even maybe you have to watch a soap opera. Oh my gosh. No, but you know what I mean? Maybe you have to escape from it. Maybe you have to watch a movie. Maybe you just have to move away from it for a while. And of course, then don't carry the guilt when you do that, because then we're watching that movie and we're feeling guilty because we're supposed to be doing something else, right? So, but you have to move away from it. And then recalibrate. We've talked a little bit about this. Challenge the story you're telling yourself. Is that a belief? Is it a rational belief? Turn off the old and turn on the new tapes. Say things to yourself, because if you say it, it changes everything. So I represent myself well. Well, this is all part of the process. Each try takes me closer. That's probability theater. A theory. I can and have overcome challenges in the past, and I do not let fear keep me from my goal. And you can't do it all, okay? So when you're trying to decide what you're going to do, when you're trying to decide, you've got all these things, career counselors tell you to do this, and you've got these on the job board and these over here, and, what do I do first? Ask yourself what will matter 1 week from now. If there's a deadline on getting a resume in for something that you really want to do, then I would say that's probably a priority, right? If there's a deadline. What will matter 1 week from now if you don't do it? Or 1 month or 1 year? And that's about prioritizing. And I want to tell you that there are certain activities in the job search, and in a 1-hour presentation, there's not time to do this. But there are certain activities in the job search that I call just standard, and some that I call premium, because they get better results. And so you're going to want to do an analysis of what you're doing, because some things will really prolong your search. Searching online prolongs your search. Unless you have, if you have an ability, some skill that's very hard to find, that would be different. For most people, not having a LinkedIn profile that demonstrates your abilities, knowledge, skills, and abilities, will prolong your search, because you've heard it. I don't have to tell you. Most jobs aren't posted, and they're looking online. Everybody, recruiters have, there's a brand new program just came out for recruiters for LinkedIn. They pay for that, but it's better than putting it on a job board because then they get to look at you. They can look at your profile and you will never know they've been there because it doesn't reveal that they looked. And so make sure that profile, it can't be Jack or Jill of all trades. It has to be very clearly one thing. In a few weeks, if you check the Fairport Library schedule, I'll be doing something there on where have all the jobs gone, job boards and social media, and I'll be talking about, you know, what job boards are good job boards to use and how to use them and what to do, and then I'll be talking about LinkedIn a little bit. There are also at the Fairport Library 2 other workshops on LinkedIn alone. Can't avoid it, and you don't want to. You don't want to. And so this one, you know, like you finding a niche job board is good. That's, you know, for IT it happens to be DICE, and for medical professions there are some special ones. But putting your resume on job boards doesn't usually bring much. You may be getting hits with it, but then you have to apply online with an application. And if you're worried about age, or if you're worried about too many jobs, or if or worried about deficiency in some way, there's no way you cannot reveal it if you're applying online with an application. So actually for the person over 40, it's not the best way to go. I'm not saying eliminating it, but it's not the best way to go. But identifying and contacting a company directly, that's a high premium one. And so it's not only that you're working, but it's the ways that you're working that are important. And if anybody wants to send me an email and get this list, I'd be happy to email it to you. So, you can send that to me, and in the subject line put career conference, and then I'll know, because I get a lot of email, and I'll know to pay attention to it. I'd be happy to send it to you because it's got the career transition activities, networking, marketing, applying for jobs, interview, administration, and self-care. So we're running out of time. Here I am. So one step at a time. What one specific action would you take to improve your prospects if you knew you couldn't fail? And I would suggest you just take that question with you, because the things that get results are the ones that are hardest for most of us to do, like direct contact with a company, networking done right. Those are the things that, at least most of the people I talk to, those are not the activities that they enjoy doing. They would prefer to just apply online. PBS, WXXI on television, they have Nick Corcodilos on. If you go to their website, and it's called Ask the Headhunter, and he's got some great tips there, all free, and on the PBS website, WXXI. There are things, if you knew you couldn't fail, would you make a phone call? If you knew you couldn't fail, would you call that lead that somebody gave you? A couple of years ago, there was a woman sitting here, and I wasn't doing this workshop, but whatever came up, she said to me, I've got this good lead, and I said, so when did you get it? And she said, a couple of weeks ago. I said, have you called? No, I'm so afraid I'll mess it up. I understand that. It's like I've got this gold treasure and I'm going to lose it. But you've lost it because you haven't called, number one. And by the way, leads must be followed up on quickly because they get cold. So, but anyway, so what might you do that you've been thinking about, thought would be a good idea, somebody told you to do, but you're worried about messing it up? So what's stopping you? So what's necessary? What's possible? What's the best way to begin? What is yours to do right now? And this is what Martha Finney says in her book called Rebound, A Proven Plan for Starting Over After Job Loss. Do something, do it right now, take control. Don't wait until your hand is forced. You absolutely use your power then. Your hand is forced when your unemployment insurance runs out. And when you get that next job, your hand will be forced if you don't keep looking. It's career management forever now, even when you're working. Don't lose your contacts. Don't lose your contact. Stay in touch with people and help them. Help them. Help other people. That's how you build good relationships. So see how you can help them. Don't wait until your hand is forced. And I feel bad that somebody just keeps getting contract jobs, because that keeps putting you out there, putting you out there. So these are the references. This PowerPoint will be on the Rochester Works website. These are the references that I've talked about today. A book that helped me a lot. I'm not suggesting everybody go to a book, because I know everybody doesn't want to do that. But I had to make a really, really tough decision once. And I was traveling by plane, and I stopped somewhere and found the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, and read it on the way back. And I had made my decision when I got back. So it's the fear of what will happen when we do it. So those are some good ideas. Questions, comments, or hostilities? I hope I didn't make it seem like I thought it was easy, because it's not, right? Can you use anything from this? Is there any takeaway for anyone here?
Do you have any handouts?
I do not. You can get these slides. You can get them. They'll be posted at Rochester Works. So you can get the slides at Rochester Works, or you can send an email to me if you want the list of all the job search activities and how I rate them. Yes?
For that gentleman, my husband has mentioned a couple of times, I know that person so well, I wonder how he's doing, but I don't have his personal contact.
Yeah, and what is your first name? Siva. Siva said that her husband has mentioned several times that he knows that person so well, but I don't have a contact for him, I don't know how to reach him, and I don't know how he's doing. Somebody who lost a job. So make sure, have an email that's easy to, I think emails should be your name, personally, or your first initial and last name or something, because when people send inquiries to me and I have to go back later to look them up, and they have some name like Gibson 203, and I'm looking for Annette, it's hard. And you know what? You make it easy for people to do business for you, because whether it's true or not, everybody feels very rushed. They don't have time. And it is true. I'll only make so many efforts before I have to move on to something else. So make sure you're easy to reach. Make sure your former colleagues know where you are, unless there's some reason that you shouldn't do that. Your message should be a positive message. You don't have to have a job when you contact them, but it should be a positive message. I'm learning a lot, met a lot of great people, moving forward, because so that they don't have to feel guilty or worried that you're going to badmouth your previous company because they can't get into that conversation. Stay in touch, okay? Yes? My email address, it's on the top slide, but you don't have to wait for that. It's Rita at RCMAssociates.com. I have some cards. I could put those out, I guess. I'll put some cards out, okay? Something else. Any other questions? Don't go out if you're overwhelmed, or I'm going to feel so bad all night that... Anyway, I'll stick around a while if anybody has any questions and would like to talk to me. Thank you so much for your attention.